In my last video, I outlined the process of manufacturing Australia's next epidemic, that of rape and sexual assault on university campuses. Step 1. Blanket university campuses with a widely discredited propaganda film. Step 2. Follow it up with a deeply flawed survey and have that survey uncritically parroted on Australia's taxpayer-funded broadcaster. Step 3. Recruit the Human Rights Commission to produce its own survey to lend credibility to the narrative. Step 4, make that same discredited film available on the ABC in anticipation of the Human Rights Commission report. Step 5, put out news stories days before the release of the report stating that an epidemic is a foregone conclusion. And thus you have universities apparently scrambling to meet the onslaught of condemnation about to come their way. And no doubt our gallant politicians will jump on the bandwagon to signal their virtue as well. Now, I want to be clear here. I'm not claiming there isn't a problem of sexual assault or rape on college campuses. One rape is one too many, and if we had a magic solution to prevent another rape from happening, we'd implement it without hesitation. At the very least, we'd all like to reduce incidents of rape and sexual assault and harassment for that matter, if it is genuine harassment and not just staring. So why criticise or oppose a process that is aimed at reducing harm? You must be a rape apologist. That's the type of tactics that are often employed with the express intention of silencing any opposition. But of course, no one is against trying to reduce harm. But the best way to do that is to get an accurate assessment of reality with good objective research, not starting with a conclusion based on bogus research and propaganda. And we've already seen this movie before. It's played out in the United States and it's been a disaster. Casey Johnson and Stuart Taylor, authors of The Campus Rape Frenzy, wrote an op-ed in the LA Times in March this year that said, since 2011, after Title IX was reinterpreted to require sexual assault cases be judged by a preponderance of evidence, a lower burden of proof, that more than 100 accused students have sued their schools, and in most cases, the colleges have lost. They argued that the new mandates and procedures amount to a de facto presumption of guilt, and that colleges are at best incapable of adjudicating allegedly criminal conduct, and at worst, hopelessly biased. By way of example, in 2015, Brown University broadened its definition to treat as sexual assault any manipulation that is followed by sex. The school then disciplined a male student for having violated this provision in 2014, so retroactively applying the definition. As a Rhode Island judge, William Smith, observed in 2016, the vague provision could make a rapist of a male student who gave flowers to a female student before the two students had consensual sex. I guess the art of seduction is out now since women hate it so much. In another case that ultimately went to court this year, Western New England University found a student guilty of violating a new affirmative consent rule, which defines anything other than a clear, knowing and voluntary consent to any sexual activity as equivalent to a no, that the school had adopted 6 weeks after his alleged misconduct. In one case, James Madison University allowed an accuser to provide an appeals board with new evidence without giving the accused a chance to respond, even though he had been found not guilty by his initial hearing panel. The appeals board overturned the original decision without checking whether the accuser's new evidence might be misleading or irrelevant. It was both. The finding was set aside in December 2016 by a district judge, Elizabeth Dillon, who said that no reasonable jury could find the process fair. Now, these authors don't seek to downplay the issue. They state that campus sexual assault is a serious problem, but they say the best research shows that sexual assault has dropped by more than half from 1997 to 2013, making a mockery of the idea that this is an epidemic. So I don't buy the good intentions argument. Yes, there are those that want to genuinely reduce harm, but there's also a nefarious element that want to abrogate basic due process by flipping the presumption of innocence and lowering the burden of proof. They want a presumption of guilt, and that's what Listen and Believe is all about. The same push to do away with due process rights in Canada has been well documented by John the Other and Diana Davidson. Check out their channels for more information on that. Anyway, back to Australia and the Fairfax News story that appeared in recent days. Universities spend millions preparing for wave of sexual assault reports. Australian universities will spend millions of dollars on counselling services as a wave of victims, I'm glad they put that in inverted commas, are expected to come forward following the release of the world's largest report into sexual assault on campus. The report, due to be published on August 1st, is expected to show widespread sexual abuse across the tertiary education sector and will raise questions about institutional duty of care and what legal avenues are available to the victims, who are among the 37,000 students taking part in the Australian Human Rights Commission survey. The impending release has sent universities scrambling to provide enough frontline services for the additional students expected to need counselling and to radically alter the culture of their campuses. So as you can see, the verdict is in before the report even comes out. In April, following reports from Fairfax Media, every one of Australia's universities committed to releasing data on sexual assaults after they were accused of actively covering up sexual abuse. In the wake of revelations, there had been 6 expulsions in the past 5 years from 145 reports of rape. And so I'm guessing we're supposed to be outraged by that statement and the accompanying graphic. So if 575 reports of rape and sexual assault were reported to university administrators, why did only a little over a quarter actually make it to police? Now, I will give you the answer to that later, but it's interesting that it doesn't appear in this article. Are you suggesting that universities dissuaded students from going to the police? The problem here is that there's a complete lack of context. Let's take the overall number of complaints, 575 sexual assault complaints over a 5-year period. If you trace that back to the source, these numbers come from Freedom of Information requests made of 37 Australian universities, of which 28 complied. So that's a total of 115 complaints per year spread over 28 universities. So that's almost exactly 4 per university per year. Now, of the 575, 145 were rape reports. So that's about 29 per year, or about 1 per university per year. Now, I don't want to minimise or trivialise rape, but that does not sound like an epidemic. And remember, those are reports, 3/4 of which did not make it to the police. But wait, there's more. The Fairfax article says there were 575 sexual assault complaints. However, the original source says, quote, only 6 out of 575 reported sexual misconduct cases at Australian universities have led to student expulsion, a groundbreaking FOI investigation has revealed. The sexual misconduct was supplied by 27 universities, including sexual assault, rape, attempted rape, sexual harassment, indecent behaviour, and filming without consent occurring between 2011 and 2016. So firstly, I went through the table twice and counted numbers from 28 universities, but it doesn't make much of a difference. The real point here is that the 575 is sexual misconduct, not sexual assault. Sexual assault and rape comprise 145 incidents. But wait, there's even more. The Fairfax article stated there were only 6 expulsions, but what they didn't tell you was, quote, note that the lack of disciplinary action in a number of cases reported is due to the case being unsubstantiated or the matter being referred to police and still being under investigation. Unsubstantiated, is that a polite way of saying some accusers were, shall we say, economical with the truth? Oh, and in addition to the 6 expulsions, 12 were suspended, 12 got warnings, 8 got reprimands, 4 got severe reprimands, 6 got voluntary separations, whatever that means, 1 got training, 1 was counselled, 1 was excluded, and 1 removed from college. Now, the Fairfax article has a link to a previous article from the same author back in April. Quote, in February, universities were accused of actively covering up sexual assaults after a submission to the Commission alleged there had been just 6 expulsions in the past 5 years, despite more than 500 official complaints. Examples included students referring to an oval as rape oval, calling cask wine slut juice, and residential quarters slut alley. So there you go. Naming things made it into the 575 complaints of sexual misconduct, which the same reporter chose to call sexual assault in his latest article. If you're looking for a reason why Fairfax is going broke, look no further than this woeful standard of journalism by Eric with a Y, ooh, that's trendy, Bagshaw. If you actually read the Sydney Morning Herald and take it at face value, you only have yourself to blame. Now, in my previous video, I drew your attention to the submissions part of the Australian Human Rights Commission. Here's a much younger me from yesterday. Now, the Human Rights Commission says that its survey was sent to a representative sample of students across all Australian universities. There's also a second part, which is an open submissions page that invites any member of the public to share their experience. Now, ethics approval was granted for the survey. However, for the submissions, quote, ethics approval is required in relation to research. The information provided in submissions is not research in the sense of a survey, but rather provides an opportunity for all members of the public to share their views. And that's important for constructing the narrative, because it's an unfortunate fact that people are often swayed by emotional testimony that you will get via submissions rather than the data. Now, an organisation which I'll be saying more about in the future, called End Rape on Campus, put out a frequently asked questions to help people fill out the online submission form, and some of those questions are very revealing. For example, 1. Are individuals eligible to participate if they aren't a currently enrolled student? Yes, there's been considerable confusion about this issue due to the ambiguous wording of some questions, but any individual can make a submission irrespective of their enrolment status. You can make a submission irrespective of when your assault occurred, including if it happened many, many years ago. So remember, this is supposed to be about the prevalence of sexual harassment, assault and rape on university campuses, but we'll take submissions from any member of the general public, regardless of whether they are or were a student, or where the assault occurred or when. 2. Are organisations eligible to participate? Yes. Oh, good. I'm sure we'll get submissions from advocacy groups with a healthy amount of truthiness in their submissions. 6. Can I make multiple submissions? Yes. One for every dirty joke you've ever overheard that wasn't directed at you, and one for every male that ever looked at you. 10. What do I do if my sexual assault did not take place at one of the specific locations listed on the form? While the form provides a narrow list of locations, your university campus, at a university social event, on placement as part of your studies, or on public transport to or from university, the Australian Human Rights Commission recognises that sexual assault often takes place in a much broader set of locations, such as parties, homes, etc. And as these assaults also impact on learning, education and student well-being, it is appropriate to include these. So in other words, the more the merrier, and we'll pretend that it's all related to university campuses to bolster our case of an epidemic. And lastly, my personal favourite. This submission form has come out before the survey has been released. What happens if I make a submission but am also one of the students to be included in the random sample for the survey? You can answer both, and we encourage you to do so. The submission process will help the Australian Human Rights Commission harvest quotes, but the rigorous data that is needed will come from the survey. And there you have it. That's the purpose, to harvest quotes to fill the emotional narrative. Swamp people with personal testimony to distract you from the actual data. So as I laid out in my previous video, all of this is just further evidence that if you can't actually demonstrate an epidemic through statistical data, you have to manufacture one. And with the media, the Human Rights Commission and hysterical feminists leading the charge, expect to hear more of that on Tuesday when the Human Rights Commission releases its report. And remember, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, or consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. I'll see you next time.